Have you ever noticed how the harder you chase happiness, the faster it seems to run away? We live in the most comfortable era in human history, with endless conveniences right at our fingertips. Yet, we are more anxious, stressed, and exhausted than ever before. We are constantly chasing the next milestone, a better job, a bigger house, the perfect relationship, convinced that once we reach it, we will finally be happy. But the finish line keeps moving. Welcome to Buddha Coha. Today, we are exploring a profound truth discovered thousands of years ago. The secret to true, lasting happiness isn't about acquiring more or fighting for control. It lies in understanding the nature of reality, and learning how to simply stop fighting it. Part 1, The Root of Suffering, the Resistance to what is. Let's make a vital distinction that has the power to change how you experience every single day of your life. We often use the words pain and suffering interchangeably, as if they are the same thing. But in the realm of ancient philosophy, they are entirely different experiences. Pain is a biological and emotional reality. It is an unavoidable part of the human experience. You will stub your toe. You will catch a cold. You will experience the sharp, breathless ache of heartbreak when a relationship ends. You will face professional rejection. You will lose people you love. This is the contract we sign simply by being born. Pain is the raw, unfiltered data of a difficult event. But what is suffering? Suffering is what happens the millisecond after the pain hits. Suffering is entirely optional. It is not an external event, it is manufactured entirely within your own mind. Suffering occurs when our minds refuse to accept the reality of the pain. Think about the last time you were truly miserable. Strip away all the drama, the story you told your friends, and the endless replay in your head. What was underneath it all? Wasn't it simply a deep, agonizing resistance to what was actually happening? When an event doesn't align with our expectations, we create psychological friction. We start a war with reality. We tell ourselves, this shouldn't be happening to me. It wasn't supposed to rain on my wedding day. They shouldn't have given that promotion to someone else. Traffic shouldn't be this bad when I'm already late. Look closely at that word, should. It might be the most dangerous word in the human vocabulary. Should is the sound of your mind rejecting reality. And here is the hard truth, when you argue with reality, you lose. But you only lose 100% of the time. The event itself, the rejection email, the traffic jam, the breakup, is just an event. It is fundamentally neutral, like rain falling from the sky. Rain isn't malicious, it's just water. But your mind takes that neutral event and spins it into a catastrophe. It becomes a personal attack, a definitive sign that you are not good enough, a reason to feel entirely broken. Imagine you are swimming in the ocean and you suddenly get caught in a rip current. The current represents reality. It is strong, and it is pulling you away from the shore. What is our natural human instinct? To panic. To fight it. To swim as hard and as fast as we can directly against the rushing water to get back to the beach. That is resistance. And what happens? You become exhausted. Your muscles burn, you swallow seawater, and eventually, you risk drowning, not because of the water itself, but because of the exhaustion that comes from fighting it. The water is the pain, the exhausting, desperate fight against it is the suffering. Any lifeguard will tell you that to survive a rip current, you must stop fighting. You swim parallel to the shore, or you simply float and let the water carry you until the pull weakens. You accept the current. You don't have to like it, you don't have to be happy about it, but you must accept it to survive it. This is what it means to embrace reality. Acceptance is not defeat. It is not throwing your hands up in the air, becoming passive, or letting people walk all over you. Acceptance is actually the most active, powerful state you can be in. Because when you stop expending all your mental energy fighting the fact that it is raining, you finally have the energy to go find an umbrella. When you stop fighting the reality that a relationship is over, you finally have the energy to begin the work of healing. We spend so much of our lives demanding that the universe bend to our personal preferences. We want to control the uncontrollable. But true freedom, the kind of quiet, unshakable peace that most people spend millions trying to buy, comes from relinquishing that demand. It comes from looking at the reality of this exact moment, dropping the shoulds, and simply saying, okay. This is what is happening right now. Part 2, The Illusion of the Snake and the Rope. In the last part, we talked about how our resistance to actual, painful events creates our suffering. But there is a second layer to this trap, a layer that is perhaps even more dangerous. What happens when the reality we are fighting against isn't even real? What happens when our suffering is based entirely on an illusion? To understand this, we have to look at one of the most powerful metaphors in Eastern philosophy, the parable of the snake and the rope. Imagine a man walking home alone on a rural dirt path. The sun has just set, and the light is fading into that tricky, deceptive twilight where shadows play tricks on the eyes. Suddenly, he stops dead in his tracks. Coiled perfectly in the middle of the path, just a few feet away, is a large, venomous snake. Instantly, the man's biology takes over. His pupils dilate. His heart slams against his ribs. A massive dose of adrenaline and cortisol floods his bloodstream. He is paralyzed by absolute, raw terror. The danger is imminent. After a terrifying standoff, he slowly backs away, turns, and sprints to a nearby village to grab a lantern. He returns with trembling hands, holding the golden light up to the dark path. The light falls on the exact spot, and the man lets out a long, heavy exhale. He almost laughs. There is no snake. It is just an old, discarded piece of frayed rope coiled in the dust. Now, let's pause and look at this from a psychological perspective. While the man was standing in the dark, was his fear real? Absolutely. The sweat on his palms, the racing pulse, the sheer panic, every single biological and emotional response he experienced was 100% real. He suffered deeply in those moments. But the cause of his suffering was a complete hallucination. We hear this story, and we think, well, that was a simple mistake. But here is the profound truth that Buddhism wants you to see: you are that man on the path, and you are hallucinating snakes every single day of your life. We suffer infinitely more in our imagination than we do in actual reality. Our minds are ancient survival machines, evolutionarily hardwired to look for the absolute worst-case scenario to keep us safe. But in the modern world, this survival mechanism has become an engine for chronic, exhausting anxiety. Think about your own life. You send an important text message to someone you care about, and hours go by with no reply. Your mind immediately coils a snake in the dark. They're angry with me. I said the wrong thing. They're losing interest. I'm going to be abandoned. Your chest tightens. Your stomach drops. You spend the entire evening suffering. The lantern is lit the next morning. They just fell asleep early after a long day at work. It was always a rope. Or your boss sends you a brief message on Friday afternoon: we need to talk first thing on Monday morning. The snake appears immediately. I'm getting fired. How am I going to pay my mortgage? My career is completely ruined. You spend your entire weekend in an agonizing state of dread, snapping at your family, unable to sleep. Monday comes, you walk into the office, and your boss asks if you can take the lead on a new, exciting project. The suffering was real. The threat was not. Buddhism teaches us that most of our anxiety, fear, and emotional exhaustion comes from fighting phantoms. We react to the projections of our own minds instead of the objective facts of the present moment. We build entire mental prisons out of assumptions, what-ifs, and catastrophic thinking. The practice, then, is to become the lantern. Awareness is the light. When you feel that familiar spike of anxiety, when you feel the story spinning out of control in your head, you must learn to pause. Shine the light of mindfulness onto the situation and ask yourself a very simple, grounding question. Am I reacting to a verified fact, or am I reacting to a snake my mind just invented? When you strip away the story and look only at the raw facts, the actual rope, you will find that the present moment is almost always manageable. The terror dissolves, not because the world changed, but because you finally saw it clearly. Part 3, The Heavy Backpack of Attachment. We have talked about how we fight the reality of the present, and how we suffer over illusions of the future. But there is a third way we manufacture our own misery, and it has to do with the past. Let's try a brief thought experiment. Close your eyes for just a second, and think about everything you are carrying right now. I don't mean in your hands or in your bank account. I mean, in your mind. Think about that argument you had with a coworker 3 days ago, where you didn't quite say what you wanted to say. Think about the bitter resentment you hold toward an ex-partner who betrayed your trust 5 years ago. Think about the harsh criticism a parent or a teacher gave you when you were just 12 years old. You are carrying all of this, every single day, as heavy, invisible rocks shoved into a backpack strapped tightly to your shoulders. In Buddhism, there is a word for this, upadana, which is often translated as attachment. But a better, more accurate word in English is clinging. Attachment sounds passive, but clinging is an active, exhausting verb. Imagine you are hanging onto the edge of a cliff, your knuckles turning white, your muscles screaming in pain. You are terrified to let go. That is what your mind does with the past. We cling to how things used to be. We cling to our grievances. We cling to our identities as victims of unfair circumstances. And the tragic irony? Most of the weight in your backpack doesn't actually exist anymore. The past is a ghost. It has no physical reality. The only place that 5-year-old betrayal or that childhood criticism exists is in the electrical firing of your own brain. Yet, your body reacts to it as if it is happening right now, pulling you down, making every step forward feel incredibly difficult. There is a famous Zen story that perfectly illustrates this self-imposed burden. 2 monks, an older master and a young student, were walking in silence through a dense forest. They came to a wide, rushing river. Standing on the riverbank was a young woman in a beautiful silk dress, clearly afraid to cross because the current was too strong. Without a word, the older monk walked over, picked the woman up, carried her across the rushing water, and set her down safely on the other side. The woman bowed in gratitude, and the 2 monks continued their journey in silence. Hours passed. The younger monk was visibly agitated. He was practically vibrating with anger. Finally, unable to hold it in any longer, he burst out, "Master, how could you do that? You know our vows. We are monks. We are forbidden from even touching a woman, let alone carrying one in our arms. You broke the rules." The older monk stopped, looked at his young student with deep compassion, and said, "Brother, I set that woman down on the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? How many people from your past are you still carrying? You are still carrying the boss who passed you over for that promotion 3 years ago. You are still carrying the friend who ghosted you. You are still carrying the mistakes you made in your 20s. You are dragging them into your present, allowing them to sit at your dinner table, sleep in your bed, and steal the joy from your current life. We cling to our painful memories because we mistakenly believe that holding on to the anger protects us. We think that if we put the rock down, it means what happened was okay. It means we condone the bad behavior. But that is a lie the ego tells you to keep you trapped. Forgiveness and letting go have nothing to do with the other person. Letting go is simply the profound realization that the backpack is too heavy, and you deserve to walk freely. If you are realizing just how heavy your own invisible backpack has become, hit the like button right now as a promise to yourself to put down at least one rock today. Leave a comment below. What is one thing you are finally ready to leave on the riverbank? Sometimes, just writing it down is the first step to letting go. And if you're finding value in this journey, subscribe to Buddha Coha so we can continue walking this path together. Now, let's talk about how to actually take the backpack off. To do that, we have to completely change the way we look at our own imperfections. Part 4, Wabi-Sabi, Finding Peace in Imperfection. Why do we carry that heavy backpack of past mistakes and future anxieties for so long? If you look deeply enough, underneath the clinging and the fear, you will almost always find a single, exhausting core belief, the belief that you are supposed to be perfect. We live in a modern culture that is absolutely obsessed with an unattainable standard of perfection. We are bombarded every single day with the highlight reels of other people's lives. We see filtered, airbrushed faces. We see flawless morning routines, impeccably clean houses, and relationships that look like they belong in a movie. We are taught to hide our struggles, conceal our aging, and bury our failures, because society tells us that to be broken is to be worthless. We expect permanence in a universe that is fundamentally governed by impermanence. We expect our bodies to look 25 forever. We expect our careers to follow a perfect, uninterrupted upward trajectory. We expect our relationships to exist without friction. And when reality inevitably falls short of this impossible standard, we feel a deep, agonizing sense of shame. We think, something is wrong with me. I am falling behind. But Buddhism offers a radically different lens through which to view the world, and it aligns beautifully with an ancient Japanese aesthetic and philosophy known as Wabi-Sabi. Wabi-Sabi is notoriously difficult to translate into English, but at its core, it is the deep, profound appreciation of things that are imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. It is the understanding that beauty is not found in pristine, factory-made flawlessness, but in the natural cycle of growth, decay, and weathering. Think about a walk through an old-growth forest. You never look at a twisted, moss-covered oak tree and think, that tree is asymmetrical. It's flawed. It should be perfectly straight. You look at its gnarled branches and exposed roots, and you find it breathtakingly beautiful exactly because it shows the evidence of surviving decades of wind, rain, and changing seasons. Why, then, do we look in the mirror and refuse to grant ourselves the same grace we give to a tree? The Japanese took this philosophy a step further and created an art form called kintsugi. When a valuable ceramic bowl falls and shatters into pieces, they do not throw it away. And they do not try to glue it back together with invisible adhesive to pretend the break never happened. Instead, They repair the broken pieces using a special lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The philosophy behind kintsugi is stunning. The breakage and the repair are treated as a vital, beautiful part of the object's history, rather than something to disguise. By illuminating the cracks with pure gold, the bowl becomes vastly more beautiful, more resilient, and more valuable because it was broken. You are no different. Your scars, your heartbreaks, the jobs you were fired from, the relationships that didn't work out, the periods of deep anxiety or depression, these are not things that ruin your value. They are not shameful secrets you need to crop out of the picture. They are your golden cracks. They are the evidence that you have lived, that you have been tested by the sheer force of reality, and that you have survived. When you truly internalize the philosophy of Wabi-Sabi, a massive, crushing weight lifts off your chest. You experience the profound freedom of giving up the exhausting campaign to be perfect. You realize that your life doesn't have to look like a curated magazine cover to be deeply meaningful. You stop demanding perfection from your spouse, and you finally start loving them for the beautifully flawed human they actually are. You stop demanding perfection from your children, allowing them the space to make their own messy mistakes. Embracing reality means looking at your beautifully imperfect, constantly changing life, and finally whispering to yourself, I am a work in progress, I am incomplete, I am flawed, and I am entirely whole just as I am. Part 5. Waking up to the present moment. When you stop demanding that your life be perfect, and when you finally put down the heavy, exhausting backpack of the past, you make a startling discovery. You look around, and you are left with only one thing, right now. This exact second. But here is the great tragedy of modern life. We are a society of time travelers, and we are missing our own lives. Think about your morning commute to work. Have you ever pulled into your office parking lot and suddenly realized you have absolutely no memory of the last 20 minutes of the drive? Your body was operating the steering wheel, your eyes were stopping at the red lights, but you were not actually in the car. Where were you? You were time traveling. Your mind was projecting itself into the future, rehearsing an argument you might have in a meeting at 10 a.m., or worrying about an email you haven't sent yet. Or perhaps your mind was drifting into the past, replaying a conversation from the night before, analyzing someone's tone of voice. A famous Harvard study revealed that human beings spend nearly 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they are currently doing. We spend half of our lives on autopilot. We are physically present, but psychologically, we are almost always somewhere else. We eat our meals while scrolling through our social media feeds, swallowing our food without ever actually tasting it. We sit on the floor playing with our children, but we are mentally planning our grocery lists. We take walks through beautiful parks on perfect autumn days, but we are completely blind to the trees because we are trapped in a maze of our own anxious thoughts. We sleepwalk through our days, existing in a persistent state of low-grade distraction, and then we wonder why life feels so hollow. We wonder why time seems to be slipping through our fingers at a terrifying speed. Buddhism offers a very blunt wake-up call regarding this habit. It teaches us that the past is nothing more than a memory, a neural pathway firing in your brain right now. And the future is nothing more than imagination, a prediction happening in your brain right now. The past does not exist. The future does not exist. The only reality, the only place where you can breathe, feel, love, and take action, is the present moment. We often treat the present moment as a frustrating obstacle we just need to get through to reach some better, more exciting moment in the future. We say things like, I just need to get through this week. I just need to make it to Friday. I just need to get through this phase of my life. But your life is not a dress rehearsal. This Tuesday afternoon, this mundane drive to the grocery store, this quiet evening folding laundry, this is not the waiting room for your actual life. This is your life. And it is ticking away while you are busy thinking about somewhere else. True mindfulness, the kind that the Buddha taught under the Bodhi tree, is not about downloading an expensive meditation app or forcing your mind to be completely blank. It is simply the radical practice of waking up. It is the practice of paying attention to what is actually happening in front of you, without judgment. When you drink your morning coffee, just drink your coffee. Feel the warmth of the ceramic mug against your palms. Smell the roasted beans. Notice the bitter, dark taste on your tongue. When you talk to your partner, actually look into their eyes and listen to the words they are speaking, instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. We constantly try to escape the present moment because it is sometimes boring, or uncomfortable, or ordinary. We pull out our phones in the elevator because we are terrified of spending even 10 seconds just standing there in silence. But when you stop running away from that now, something miraculous happens. You realize that ordinary moments are not empty, they are overflowing with a quiet, profound beauty. You stop living in the gap between what is and what should be. You just live, fully and completely, here. And that is where peace is hiding. It isn't waiting for you in the future when you finally get your life together. Peace is waiting for you right here, in the only moment that has ever truly mattered. Part 6, The Art of True Letting Go. Now that we have put down the heavy backpack of the past, and we have learned to anchor ourselves in the reality of the present moment, we face the final, and perhaps the most difficult, practice on this path, the art of true letting go. When we hear the phrase, let go, our modern conditioning instantly recoils. We live in a society that glorifies the relentless hustle. We are taught to grit our teeth, push through the pain, never take no for an answer, and force our will upon the world until we get exactly what we want. To the modern mind, letting go sounds suspiciously like giving up. It sounds like failure. It sounds like apathy, or weakness, or becoming a doormat for other people to walk all over. But this is a massive misunderstanding of Buddhist philosophy. Letting go has absolutely nothing to do with apathy. It does not mean you stop caring. You can still be incredibly ambitious. You can still work passionately toward building a beautiful career, raising a family, and fighting for a better world. True letting go simply means releasing your rigid, white-knuckled demand for a specific outcome. It means you stop trying to micromanage the universe. There is an old story about how hunters in certain parts of Asia used to catch wild monkeys. They wouldn't use complex nets or dangerous weapons. Instead, they would take a heavy glass jar with a very narrow opening and tie it securely to the base of a tree. Inside the jar, they would drop a single, sweet piece of fruit or a handful of nuts. Eventually, a monkey would wander by, smell the treat, and reach its long, slender hand through the narrow opening of the jar. The monkey would grab the treat, forming a tight fist. But the opening of the jar was designed to be just wide enough for an empty hand to slide in, but entirely too narrow for a clenched fist to pull out. The monkey would become stuck. He would pull and panic and scream, completely trapped by the heavy jar. And here is the profound tragedy: the monkey was never actually trapped by the jar. He was trapped by his own refusal to let go of the prize. The very second he opened his hand and released the fruit, he would be completely free to run back into the forest. But his desire for the outcome was so strong, so blinding, that he would rather lose his freedom, and ultimately his life, than let go of the prize in his hand. How many times in your life have you been that monkey? How many times have you held on to a toxic relationship that was actively destroying your mental health, simply because you refused to let go of the idea of who you thought that person could be? How many times have you stayed in a soul-crushing job because you couldn't let go of the prestigious title? How many times have you destroyed an evening with your partner because you stubbornly refused to let go of your desperate need to be right in an argument? We sit there, exhausted and trapped, screaming at the universe because we are stuck. We think the world is punishing us. We think we are victims of circumstance. But all we have to do is open our hands. The things you hold on to the tightest are usually the exact things that are causing you the most agonizing pain. You think your tight grip is keeping you safe. You think your anxiety is protecting you from future disaster. You think your control is holding your life together. But control is an illusion. Life is wild, unpredictable, and fundamentally uncontrollable. People will change their minds. Markets will crash. Illness will strike. The weather will turn. When you try to control the uncontrollable, you break. You become brittle. But when you learn the art of non-attachment, when you learn to love deeply but hold loosely, you become like water. Water doesn't fight the shape of the rocks in the riverbed. It gracefully flows around them, adapting to reality. Yet, water is the most powerful force on earth, capable of carving the Grand Canyon. Letting go is the ultimate act of courage. It is the brave decision to step into the unknown present moment, open your tightly clenched fists, and say to the universe, I don't know what is going to happen next, but I accept it. And in that profound surrender, you will finally find the peace you have been desperately searching for all along. So, where do we go from here? You have watched this video. You understand the concepts intellectually. You know that fighting reality is the root of your suffering. But understanding the map is not the same thing as walking the territory. Buddhism, mindfulness, and the art of letting go are not spectator sports. They are daily, active practices. Tomorrow morning, you will wake up, and life will happen. The universe will not suddenly become perfect. You might face a sudden setback, a harsh word from a stranger, or a frustrating disappointment. That is the first arrow. It is the inevitable pain of being human, and you cannot control it. But in that exact fraction of a second, you will have a choice about the second arrow. Will you shoot yourself with it? Will you resist the reality of the moment, complain that life is unfair, and spin a story of misery in your head? Or will you take a deep breath, open your clenched fists, and simply say, this is what is happening right now. I accept it. You are not going to be perfect at this. You will forget. You will fall back into old habits of clinging and resisting. And when you do, please remember this, do not punish yourself. Judging yourself for failing to be perfectly mindful is just shooting another arrow. Simply notice it, forgive yourself, and gently return to the present moment. The Buddha never promised a life completely free of pain or heartbreak. What he promised was the end of unnecessary suffering. He promised that if you stop fighting the reality of this exact moment, you will discover a profound, unshakable peace that does not depend on your circumstances being perfect. That peace isn't waiting for you in the future. It has always been right here. You just needed to stop running long enough to notice it. If you are finally ready to put down the heavy backpack and stop fighting reality, hit the like button right now. Leave a comment below with the words, I choose peace today, to cement your commitment. Please share this video with just one person who you know is carrying too much weight right now. And to continue exploring the deep, ancient wisdom that transforms modern life, subscribe to Buddha Coha and turn on notifications. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your presence. Until next time, take a deep breath, let go, and find your peace in the present.